Hello, Richard from budgetguitarist.com. There's been a lot of talk online about Guitar Center recently, and I've been wanting to check out the new Fender standard Stratocaster, which is made in Indonesia. So I took a trip down to Guitar Center in Clearwater, Florida, to see if they had the new line of Fender guitars, and they did, and I got a chance to play them. So I'm going to share my opinions of them in this video. Guitar Center does not want me to shoot video in their store, and I respect that. It's their place of business. So as usual, I just took some pictures of what I was looking at and playing. I did run into a couple old friends, and we talked for like 20 minutes, but that's not in the video either. Let's get into it. So as you can see, the new Fender standard Stratocaster is $599.99, and the guitar I tried out had a maple fingerboard. These Strats are made in Indonesia, which is where they make the Squire brand. This Strat had ceramic pickups, 2-pole trem system, and if you recently bought one of these, you're not going to like what I have to say about them. I didn't like anything about this guitar. The pickups sounded pretty much like the pickups on my Squire Affinity Strat. The nut wasn't cut properly for the high E string, right? It sounded like a sitar. There's no excuse for that. The neck felt inexpensive to me. The whole guitar just felt cheap. I was expecting something that felt like a top-of-the-line Squire. To me, it felt more like a lower-end Squire. Now, I will grant you this is all very subjective, and I only played one guitar. So I don't know if it was the finish or the wood or what the deal was, but to me, it felt like about a $350 guitar. And I've played enough $350 guitars to know. And the bridge was floating, even though there was no trem arm on it. And you know what? I could not get that guitar in tune. Not I couldn't get it to stay in tune, I couldn't get it in tune, period. I wouldn't play it the way it was set up. I'd tighten the screws up and just deck the bridge. Since I couldn't keep it in tune without a vibrato bar, I mean, can you imagine putting one on? That's the sign of an inexpensive guitar. That's what I would expect from an Affinity Strat, right? Or the cheaper Sonic line. If you use a bar extensively, then you want a better guitar. Okay, you should never just take somebody's word for something like this. If you're interested in the new Fender Strat, you got to go play one for yourself. I'm just giving you my opinion. And my opinion is that it felt cheap. There are plenty of reviews online where YouTubers seem to be okay with it or like it. I don't see it. It felt like a $350 Squire to me. I think $600 is way too much money for this guitar. Okay, so what did I make of the next model up, the Player 2 series? They had some of these for, I think it was like $7.99. I didn't snap a picture of the other Strats I tried, but I did play them. And honestly, the Player 2 series felt like a made-in-Mexico Strat that 3 years ago would have been $5.99. It's definitely a step up from the standard Strat. It felt better, it played better, it sounded better. It's a better guitar. But it's not as good as my American parts caster here. So then next up was the American Performer, which is where we start to get into the good stuff, right? Same deal. I didn't snap a picture of the thing with a price tag, but it looked like this stock photo. At around $1,400, I consider this to be about the same quality as the old entry-level American Strats that sold for about $1,000 several years ago. The neck on this guitar right here is a Highway 101 American Strat neck, and it felt pretty similar to mine. It felt great. So to me, it just sort of feels like Fender added about $200 onto the price tag of their whole line, and they put a Fender sticker on the Squire for the standard Strat. I know prices are kind of high these days, and they're likely to go higher, but I personally don't see the value. I think there's never been a better time to buy a used Fender, personally. And I am a massive Fender fan. Okay, as an aside, I want to mention that every guitar in this store was unlocked. You could take anything off the wall and play it. This is a massive improvement, and Guitar Center should be applauded for this move, right? I would definitely be more likely to buy a guitar from Guitar Center when I try it out without needing a salesperson. Okay, let's look at some of the other guitars I saw at Guitar Center, starting with this. A Gibson Les Paul Studio with a bound neck for $2,000. Oh, so now we've hit the point where the Les Paul Studio is $2,000? I mean, you can get a Les Paul Studio for less if you don't need the neck binding, but to me, a Studio for $2,000 is not a great value. But how about this? A new PRS SE CE24 Satin for $499. New? This is as no frills as it gets, for sure. But at this price point, it played pretty decent. I mean, I didn't like the pickups, but I never liked the SE pickups, right? If you want to get into a PRS pretty cheap and you're willing to swap out that bridge pickup, I think this guitar is pretty good for the money, honestly. Unlike the Fender standard Strat, the nut on this guitar was cut correctly. They had the PRS SE Silver Sky for $849, and I played it like I always do, and it played better than the Fender Player 2 series. Seriously, this is a better Strat than the Player 2 for similar money, in my opinion. I think this just demonstrates that Fender's cutting too many corners. Okay, so here's some pictures from the used rack. We got a Kramer 1984 guitar with a locking trem, 639, and an Agile AL 3100 with a locking trem, 394. These are decent prices, you know, if you're looking for a locking trem system on a budget. Here's a Schecter Nick Johnson Diamond Series for $499. That is not bad at all. I mean, it's better than the standard Fender, right? I like the Diamond Series. Here's a Squier Sonic Strat, which is the cheapest Squier they sell for $144. That's about what it's worth if we're being generous. Next is last year's Player Series, made in Mexico, $634. If this were $599, then I think it'd be a good price. It's a decent guitar. It's good. Here's an Ibanez AZ something or other that I guess is okay for the money. I don't know. You get a Schecter Griffin Diamond Series $299, which is a decent guitar if you want humbuckers. None of this stuff is really my thing, honestly. And the lameness continues with a Michael Kelly semi-hollow body for $504, right? Michael Kelly was the house brand for Sam Ash, and this makes me sad because I liked Sam Ash. $504 seems a little much for this thing. Next was an ESP LTD something or other with a locking trem and all the visual appeal of a coffee table. Gotta say, though, it played really great. ESP makes good playing guitars for sure. All right, how about this thing? Ovation Deacon for $899. It plays good, it sounds good, and it looks extremely stupid to me. Like somebody took a chainsaw to a decent guitar and cut off all the wood that they felt like they didn't need, which is actually pretty close to how they were designed. Ugly. Just my opinion. Okay. Next to it's a Epiphone Kirk Hammett Greenie 59 Les Paul. It's got upgraded pickups, and it's not used. It's a scratch and dent item, so there was some flaw that I didn't see on it. I'm not in the market for a $970 Epiphone Les Paul, so I didn't bother playing it. It's a good guitar, though. Next is the Squier Classic Vibe Duosonic, $349. I'm not personally a fan of the Duosonics, but if you like them, it's a decent deal. I mean, all the classic Vibe stuff is cool, right? And they all have pretty good pickups. And then there's this Epiphone SG with a cracked neck for $449. I can only assume this is a practical joke. How about a low-end BC Rich Mockingbird for $249? Does that interest you? No? Me neither. But this did. PRS SE Paul's Guitar, $649. That's a good deal. It's got American pickups in it. Then there's a PVT 15 for $349, blah, blah, blah. But at this point, I was getting bored, and so I moved on from the used rack. Okay, if you're into keyboards, and you're probably not, Here's a used Hydrosynth for $8.99. Now, those sell for around $1,300 new, so it's not a bad price. Here's a used Moog Matriarch for $15.99. If you want to remember how to say Moog, it's Moog, which rhymes with Vogue. Now you can impress your nerdy keyboard friends by correcting them. They'll say, no, it's Moog. And they'll look it up and they'll be wrong. It's Moog. They also had a Juno DS88 that's made by Roland for $8.49. That's a good price on that. Okay, I just had to sneak this in. There's a big Best Buy right next to Guitar Center, and I like to go in and look around. And I can remember when they had a huge section of Switch games. These days, it's just one rack. You know, I wonder if we're even going to have stores in the future. I mean, it's hard to compete with online pricing. So many chains are doing bad, but sometimes you just want to buy something in person, you know? I don't know what the future holds for retail stores, but I do know that if they go away, I'm pretty sure I won't like it. So there you go. If I were a bigger channel, maybe Fender would be sending me guitars for review. But if I wanted that relationship to continue, maybe I'd have to find something nice to say about them. After playing today's lineup, all I can conclude is that Fender's cutting corners, and I don't think they're a good deal these days. If they sold that Fender Standard Strat for like $3.99, I'd be singing their praises right about now. So I think it's a matter of cashing in on the brand name. Maybe I'm wrong, you know, maybe it'll be really successful. It will be interesting to see how this works out for them. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you some future Friday at 5.